Welcome to the A-Dub Club, a podcast about sci-fi, fantasy, technology, pop culture, the internet, and general nerdery. There are three things that are important to know. One, we occasionally use swear words, but try to stay in the range of PG-13, or at least the kind of R that cool parents are fine with. Two, we may talk spoilers. In this particular episode, we discuss how we're dealing with the global coronavirus pandemic yet again, so be warned. And finally, three, most importantly, allegedly, Philadelphia has the most impressionist paintings out of any city in the world other than Paris. With that out of the way, welcome to the clubhouse. We have snacks. Welcome to the A-Dub Club. I'm Andrew Whipple.
I'm Alex Wade.
And here we are on a lovely October day, because it's important to timestamp the records of these, given how incredibly long I'm going in between recording and editing and releasing these episodes.
Yes. Yeah, it is a beautiful October day. My leaves haven't started changing yet. Have yours?
A little bit. I can see some right outside this window. Half of them are the bright red, bright orange, and then the rest are slowly starting to get there.
Gotcha. Yeah. Summertime is over. Things are starting to get a little more sad. Darkness is enveloping us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Enveloping us just like the sweaters that we're going to be wearing, because it's going to be sweater weather, and that is honestly my peak season. But the actual reason for the season why we're here today is that this is, I think, is it our fifth or is it our sixth of these quarantine specials, or starting out as a quarantine special, ... That will be a conversation to have at some point in this episode as to whether or not it is still a pandemic check-in. But this is our sixth one of these pandemic check-ins, starting all the way back in March of 2020 with Armchair Epidemiologist, then Shame Memes, Cocoon Time, Is She From Canada, A Minimum Amount of Hissing, and then now, who knows what this one will be called, where we ask the question, Alex Wade, how are you doing?
I think I'm doing good. I think I do have a bit of summer blues in generally going on. I feel like I had a fantastic summer, and things are still going well, but it's just darker and slightly colder outside. But outside of that, pandemic-wise, I am a little bit sick right now, which I got checked for COVID. It's not COVID, but it is a little bit sick. Yeah, but I think I'm doing good. How about you?
I think I'm doing good, too. Yeah, pandemic-wise, continuing to rock and roll with no COVID-2 showing up at any point. But yeah, in terms of the rest of the life, very busy summer, and so kind of enjoying a little bit of a come down from that over the last month and probably for the next month or so before holidays start kicking back up again. But overall, doing pretty good, I think, in a reasonably solid place, which is nice.
That's good. Yeah. I feel that way a little bit too. In life in general, a couple romantic things recently that have happened that just makes me feel generally lonely, and kind of feel like not the wool got pulled from my eyes, but just like I feel like my perspective just got changed about my life from being kind of content to being lonely, which is fine, but totally not fine.
Interesting. Is there more that you want to say on that, on mic?
Yeah, I think what it is I was really busy over the summer in a lot of aspects of my life and not really pushing too much or caring too much romantically about a lot of things. And then when things start to happen, which have been good, but then also like that shifts my perspective out of like, I don't know, not necessarily the rat race, but like the doings of trying to get something started and not really focusing on what feelings I may or may not have, to starting to see people and have other people come back into my life and just get a perspective of like, where their lives are at and stuff like that. It just starts to shift my view of how I want to be and what I want in life, I guess.
Interesting.
That's as vague as I can get.
Okay, sure.
But yeah.
Do you find that any of that thought process applying to other aspects of life, particularly
Actually,
when you're talking about like rat race and connecting with people and stuff like that? I'm curious, do you feel like that applying to other platonic or professional, or as if you've listened to previous episodes of this podcast, that's one thing that has happened over the course of the last several years is additional focus and sort of first placing the artistic career in addition to the software development career.
Absolutely. Yeah. It has in a couple of ways of like, I feel like my perspective romantically kind of went from, I'm no whatever, seeing the trees through the forest or something like that. Like I'm now above the 10,000 foot view or something or whatever, right? Closer to that perspective is how I'm feeling about my life, which also professionally, I'm like starting to think a lot more about like, I was doing really great over the summer. Like, yeah, I'm doing a lot of these other things. Like I have these things lined up that I'm doing for right now. I had a show that I was in and I'm like, here's the next thing, here's the next thing, here's the next thing. Versus now I'm starting to get like, what am I doing for this next year? And like, I'm in a show right now, which is great. And I'm excited for it. I don't have anything planned after that right now. I had this really cool audition that I didn't get, which is fine. That's the way how it goes. But it's like, okay, I gotta start thinking more long term and more instead of like, what's the next thing? Like, what's the next 5 things? Which also romantically is like, okay, with people who I'm interested in, like, which I don't know if this is the right way to think about romantic life as a career. That doesn't seem healthy.
A long game.
Yeah, but that's what inevitably always happens for me in getting into relationships in general is I start to think about what is the point where it will end, and that's a bad way to phrase it, but like in longer term things, it's like, how bad's the divorce going to be, which is like still a positive framing of it, right? Like
say more. Maybe, but
this is
say
a very
more
interesting
by what you mean.
Episode.
Say more by what you mean by that as a positive framing, or what is the positive aspect of that framing?
Absolutely. So, like, let's say I go on a first date with someone, and like, it's okay, it's fine. I'm thinking about, okay, when are we going to go on the second date? Versus like if I go on a first date with someone who I really like, or if I go on a second date with someone who I really like and can see it being a lot more, I start to think of like, okay, what are the issues a year down the line? I always disaster most things in my life, but the idea that I disaster it further down because I'm like, of course it'll get to be I like this person a lot enough to be a long-term important thing,
Sure. That actually does make a lot of sense.
I don't know if it's healthy.
No, but there's an internal logic to it.
Yeah, it's definitely also a huge indicator of like my feelings towards people and like how I start to like, oh my God, this is I don't know if I'm ready to be in this such a committed thing yet. I say after like the second date to myself, but
yeah, it's interesting. I think I sort of am both like that and not, in that I think I do the catastrophizing well ahead of anything being real in the slightest. And then once something does start to be a little real, I stop doing that. So it's like, I'll do the catastrophizing will block me from the point of even like in the hypothetical, like asking out a person or whatever. And I think especially historically, that's been very true of like, do the play out the entire worst case scenario version of the relationship and therefore use that as an excuse to like not even try. But now maybe it's also, spoiler alert, because currently in a very loving, wonderful relationship. So maybe that's what the difference is. But found a lot less of that. You heard this. You were the recipient of me saying this, a year and a half ago in the like pre-asking out phase.
Yeah.
But a lot of that beforehand and much, much less of it, if any of it, afterwards, which is interesting and actually a little bit surprising to me considering how much of the sort of similar boat catastrophizing stuff happening on the front end.
That's also something of like, I was in a relationship that I catastrophized and I had so much anxiety about during it that like that was the main cause, one of the main causes of the breakup. And like that person has possibly come back into my life recently who I would love to talk to about this and like kind of be like, hey, first off, sorry for all the numerous shitty things that I did that you end up doing to someone in a long-term relationship. But also like, I don't know, how was that? I don't know how to fix that of me. And you have insight on who I am as a person. You are on the receiving end of that. And like, I don't know how to not catastrophize, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That is definitely a conversation that I want to have with this person though. And, you know, it's like I've been in therapy for the past 3 years and I have, you know, not heavy anxiety, light anxiety or whatever. And this is the manifestation of that. And, you know, always playing devil's advocate with myself. And I feel like you do that a bit as well, a lot too.
Oh, yes. You know,
we feed off each other in that way, unfortunately.
Oh, yes. In a constructive way, I think, for the most part. But
for the most part, yeah. But, yeah, this is a very interesting turn for how our pandemic episode check-in was supposed to take. But
I know. Well, okay. On that, is this the last pandemic episode or pandemic episode as pandemic themed? Are we in the pandemic anymore?
That is, a interesting question. I think not. I think this is the last pandemic episode.
I kind of agree. I mean, it really has been like, so, okay, let me think through of the last 6 months since the last time we recorded, the things where pandemicness has come into play in some way, shape, or form. We went traveling. There's a couple circumstances we're having to take a COVID test in order to regain entry into the United States. All right. So there's that. But definitely felt more like this is a bureaucratic hurdle than this is a necessary part of a reasonable epidemiological thing, as evidenced by the fact that like 3 weeks after we arrived back in the United States was when they were like, yeah, you don't have to do that anymore. Got another booster like 3 weeks ago. So I guess that, but like I got it at the same time I got my flu shot.
Yeah.
Went to a friend's wedding where they had us take COVID tests beforehand. Went to a family member's wedding where they didn't.
I'm going to a wedding this weekend that I realized they haven't asked me at all for it.
Yeah. But yeah, not really much in the way of COVID-iness. I mean, the caveat is historically winter is worse than summer and we're about to head into winter. So
true.
Maybe something else comes along, like another variant or whatever, that changes that calculus. I think if we had recorded, I think we actually mentioned in the last episode, like if we had recorded the last episode during December and January, then maybe it would have felt more pandemic-y than it did in May, and certainly more so than it does now in October. But yeah, I mean, it feels very flu-like. I'm still wearing masks on public transportation. I'm still wearing masks at like movie theaters, but fully do not at restaurants, don't at grocery stores.
Yeah. I mean, I went to a play this Wednesday and like there were a lot of people wearing masks. I was wearing a mask too. There were a lot of people not wearing masks. And, you know, that their announcement was like, we would like you to wear masks, but it's not required. I feel like these are just things that are either going to slowly go away or stick around for a long time. And I hope it becomes part of the culture, frankly, of like, oh, if you're sick, wear a mask, kind of similar to East Asian countries that do that.
Yeah, I think what we've said on previous episodes, which I basically agree with still, is like you just said, oh, if you're sick, make that part of your etiquette. Yeah. And then airplanes, I think airplanes is going to be the last one, if that ever stops being a thing of me wanting to wear a mask on an airplane. That's probably the last one to go. And then, I mean, though, I don't remember if it was in the last one or it was in 2 ones ago, but I do remember talking about like, oh, at what point am I going to stop wearing a mask to the grocery store? It definitely happened over the course of these last 6 months was where it went from, oh, I just forgot it one day. Oh, my girlfriend and I are going to the grocery store and we didn't bring a mask, to then now I just never. And that definitely happened over the course of this summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really just transportation, or you're sitting in a box with people for 90 minutes to 2.5 hours, like movies and plays.
Yeah. Even then, like I didn't wear one at the movie. It was a really big theater. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, and the movie one, it doesn't feel
as necessary. Like we went to go see a movie last night, Tar, great movie, recommend it, go watch it. Kate Blanchett's really good. But at least for me, I was feeling like, oh, I'm glad I'm wearing the mask, and I do feel a little better about it, but like it didn't feel like it was a necessary thing by any stretch, or even like 6 months ago, a year ago, of like, oh, it's not required and other people aren't doing it, but it feels necessary to me to do it. In this case, it was more like, yeah, easy enough to do it. Might as well. Had to do it for the public transit to get there. Why not?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if I did end up forgetting it and going to a movie, I wouldn't like turn around and make sure to go to a drugstore and buy a mask or something like that if I realized on the way there I forgot.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to go get that booster.
Yeah, it was easy. Same as the last booster, or the first booster, I guess. For me, it knocked me out for like a full day. I felt miserable, but that's the same thing that happened with the other booster.
Okay.
And other people, my girlfriend, she was fine, just a little sniffly. So
yeah, so pandemic's over. Cool, fantastic.
I mean,
we did it. Good job, Lobo.
Yeah, we did it. Why do I feel not so great about the victory?
Yeah, I don't know if you suggested this before, but I really like the inception of this like pandemic check-in thing. But I think it should. I'm still interested in doing like a 6 month or maybe yearly, like
I think so too.
check-in, and like this transforms into that,
I think so too. I think it provides a nice little time capsule and look back on stuff as things change. I think what'll be interesting is if we continue to do this, and maybe we change our mind in a year and say, actually, no, this sucks and we don't want to do it anymore. But which I think, spoiler for the next episode that we're going to do afterwards, there will also be some, we're not going to say what it is, but there's going to be some good opportunities to talk about, let's say, the last 5 years, let's say the last 10 years. But I think the pandemic check-in era, by virtue of it, how much of it, actually, that's a good thing. I think we've picked a very interesting and very tumultuous point at which to be doing these every 6 month check-ins, such that, like, I think for both of us, looking back on 2.5 years ago, it definitely feels very, very different than where we're at now. And I wonder how much of that is pandemic induced directly, how much of that is pandemic induced indirectly, of like, oh, you're going through a big traumatic event and that gets you to change your life in interesting ways, or how much of that is just, because we decided to record every 6 months of our mid to late 20s, and a lot of stuff happens in your mid to late 20s if you are professionals in urban cities in the US in 2022.
I'm really curious about, like, I feel like the world's, slowly going to shit, obviously. How much of that is just, our mid 20s? How much of that is media getting more, prevalent, more fear stoking, more easier to view all the horrible things that are happening in the world, or actual reality of things are actually getting worse in the world at a more drastic rate than ever before?
Yeah, I don't know. Though you do every once in a while see those like Bill Gates, John Hank Green coming out of the woodwork of like, but just so you know, we reduced child mortality worldwide by X, we cut it in half again every year, which I say that kind of snarkily. It's not true. And it's not like good and valuable and important that like maybe still on aggregate. Well, maybe that's the privileged position of ours. It's like, okay, maybe on aggregate, the world is better now than it was 10 years ago. If you look at everything, which maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but
I don't know.
Doesn't feel that if what it is averaging out the drastic improvements in like maternal mortality, childhood mortality, life expectancy, et cetera, in developing nations versus, but I feel bad because the Republicans are winning. Is it the greatest and most moral thing for me to feel worse about that? No, but is it true? Yes.
Yeah.
So
that was a friend of ours from high school, Maya. She had talked about, I think it was like a year ago or something. I randomly was with her, And it was talking about how, like, you know, progress is not linear. It is erratic, and like we lose progress in a lot of ways at a lot of times. And you know, there's the phrase of what the long arc of history.
The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, I think, is
sure,
or something close to that.
Yeah, and like that, I don't know if I agree with that, and also is a bit hand wavy, and like, what do you do with that? I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
well, one,
okay.
So you're saying that you don't agree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? All right, Alex. All right. Good to know. Yeah.
It's, well, I feel like sometimes that's used as an excuse to like, oh, cool. So then we 100%. Don't have then we don't 100%. Have to do something, right? Like, okay, I agree with the sentiment, but it is a useless phrase, is a platitude, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and even then, like, looking at the actual quote, or the actual just one sentence quote, because I'm not looking at whatever it said in context, which I'm going to take a wild stab and say, generally speaking, when it comes to quoting Martin Luther King, usually if you read the thing in context, you're like, oh, that's a lot more nuanced and interesting. Yeah. And like,
he could explicitly be saying that phrase, which I'm not forgetting, whatever, long arc of universe bends towards justice, but we as individuals have to push or something, right? Like,
exactly. But I was going to say the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Then to me, it sounds like, oh, that's actually a little bit more saying hey, it's hard and it's going to change and it's going to backslide and stuff like that. But eventually, bit by bit, you're going to eventually get there, is a different vibe than just saying everything will work out in the end. But it's also a different vibe than like what you were saying is, are you saying everything will work out in the end versus we need to make it so that everything works out well in the end? And,
exactly. There's one episode in Avatar, which you haven't gotten to yet, but there's a fortune teller who basically is kind of lazy and doesn't predict a volcanic explosion, or like that the town isn't going to be destroyed. And then the science guy is like, that's bullshit. And he goes, checks the volcano. Spoilers, by the way, Whipple, but it's fine.
Sure.
Still a great episode. And she basically predicts that the village isn't going to be destroyed. So then they go and they change the clouds, because she reads the clouds to make it the symbol for volcanic destruction. And then at the very end of the episode, he's like, see, Aunt Wu was wrong. Like she predicted incorrectly that the volcano wasn't going to explode. It's like, but she predicted that the village wasn't going to be destroyed, and it wasn't. It's like, because we did something about it. Like,
well, also then the reverse of what is every single episode of That's So Raven. It's she sees a prediction. She says, great, I'm going to try and avoid that prediction. And then in trying to avoid the prediction, she's the one that causes the thing to come true.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about that?
I don't know. But
because society, is it getting worse or not? Sure, eventually, like, we'll be in a Star Trek communist utopia, but the long road to get there.
Yeah. I will say the other thing, which has, I think, especially in comparison to the last few episodes, or in comparison to the first few episodes of Quarantine Pandemic Check-In, a thing that I've noticed is that also, like, you know, when you live with someone you love and you spend a lot of time with them, you spend a lot less time focusing on stuff on like Twitter and in the news and things like that, and finding myself like, oh, I'm also just like less plugged in on the kinds of stuff that I would be obsessively plugged in on 2 years ago. So that is also the like, well, for as not great as things are now, there's there's less dramatic Trumpian intrigue happening all the time in terms of at least political news and stuff like that, which makes it, I think, easier to disengage at the margins in comparison to, 2015 through 2021.
So what you're saying is you're lazy and you're not pushing us towards progress because you're ignoring the state of the world? Wow.
Hey, excuse you. I'm voting in a swing state. So I'm actually doing my part. And it's
true.
It's going to be very important. Yeah, timestamp. This is before the elections. It's going to be such a bummer with if and when Dr. Oz wins.
Oh, that's rough. And he's got they're very close margins right now. Like,
oh yeah,
it's
Republicans
not
are coming home.
Yeah. No, the only thing I voted for recently that was of any consequence was we had a congressional primary for the Democratic candidate, and basically the progressives and leftists divided the vote, and the basically Republican who bought the seat won. So it's great.
We love it.
Go
team.
America.
Yeah. Other than that,
how else you doing?
How else am I doing? Let's see. So
how's software development?
Yeah. So the other big change that happened over the course of the last 6 months, I think I cut the discussion that we had about, hey, this is a thing that might happen or is about to happen soon out of the last episode. But maybe I didn't. If not, well, apologies for listeners. Then you've heard me say this, in which case you've also heard me just tell you this because you're probably an actual real life friend of ours or family member. But about 3.5 months ago now, I switched out of product management into software development. I'm currently an associate software engineer at the same company where I was working previously. In fact, on one of the 5 teams that I product managed, which in and of itself, that's a good enough reason to not want to be doing that job anymore. But yes, I'm a backend developer working in Python primarily and doing all sorts of, our team owns a bunch of like shared backend service stuff like authentication. Right now, our big project is we're migrating to Okta. And so that's the big one that's like keeping the team up. Not at night because good work-life balance. That's what I like about this team as opposed to some other teams at my company. But doing we do stuff like authentication, merchant data, back end of a gift card system, blah, blah, blah. A whole bunch of little like miscellaneous back end API services.
Are you liking working as a developer?
I love it. It's so much more fun. The thing that I'm going to be very curious about in the next, like over the course of the first year, like especially once I get to the 1 year mark, is how much of it, if you've listened to these previous episodes, you've known I've had a lot of angst and Sturm und Drang about my previous role. And some of the stuff that I talk about is stuff that I do think is inherent to the product role of like, your whole job is to like coordinate and get other people to do things as opposed to like do things yourself. But some of it also was very specific to like things I don't like about how the product role exists at my previous company or how my specific instantiation of the product role exists at that company. And so I'll be very curious to see like how much of the feeling right now that I have about software development continues a year in. And I think the big thing is going to be like how much of it is me feeling thrilled that I ran away from something I didn't like to being thrilled that I'm running to a thing that I do like. It's probably going to be a mix of both, but I hope the balance is more that like, you know, it's a 30% that disappears. That was the, yay, I'm glad I'm leaving my old job. And then the other 70% remains. If it's the other way around, then, well, I guess we'll deal with that when we deal with that.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just really, really like the thing of, hey, here's a task. Go figure it out. Go do it. And then when you're done, if you need help, ask for it. And then when you're done, turn it in and go pick up a new thing, as opposed to the, hey, here's a thing, go figure out how to get everyone else to make it work.
Yeah.
I will say that a thing that I have started to notice a little bit more now, it's like 3 months or so in, particularly because it's a company that I am already familiar with and a company where I was a product manager for 1.5 years and in the same product space that I'm developing for, starting to get a little bit of like, oh, here are some of the ways of thinking or some parts of the old product role that I do miss a little bit of like, you know, when we're having a grooming or having a discussion about a ticket or stuff like that, I do find myself like sometimes leaping in maybe a little bit too much, especially for a junior developer technically, on like, oh, well, here, especially since the product manager now we're working with was my old boss when I was a PM, but like me chiming in and pointing out like, oh, here's this product thing that we should change, or here's the like doing a lot of like product-y thinking, which I think is good and valuable in the abstract, but like I do have now that I've gotten a little more comfortable with the software portion, as comfortable as you can get in 3 months, I guess.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
Starting to ants back towards like, there's some stuff that like some things about thinking about product in a producty way is, I don't want to unlearn it, but unlearning, like, that's not your job. You can be there to help
Sure.
provide insights and stuff like that. Because ideally, I mean, even as a PM, I loved having producty engineers who could like give suggestions and insights there. But like, realizing it's not your job anymore to do that. It's your job to be a good partner to the people who do that.
See, that's interesting because like at my software job, we lost a lot of our designers. And then so now none of our org's teams have designers. We now have a design team.
Okay.
And a lot of design work is now like, oh yeah, just go ask the design team, but also go do a lot of it yourself. And it's kind of the opposite of what I'm doing of like, oh, these are additional duties that I have not had before that we need to start to be thinking about and adding on to our job.
Interesting.
Yeah. Not a fan. I am not a fan of design.
Sure. That's one area where being a pure backend engineer is great because don't have to deal with that.
Yeah. It's we just did a weird reorg at my company. Not even a reorg, but like we have these teams called hothouse teams that are they add on, they're like kind of multi-tools basically. So we just doubled in size with an additional hothouse team to our team.
Okay.
Or with a hothouse team to our team. And they are going to be more working on the front end stuff, which I'm a little frustrated by because I prefer front end and they're putting me more into like the middle layers and stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I like the front end.
Say more about that. Well, what do you like about the front end?
It's what I know. And then also it's immediately the answer's there. Like you do it and it changes. Like,
okay, sure.
Yeah. And then also what I really like, this is typically software developers hate this shit, but I really, really enjoy it of like code cleanup. And like we have a core to our system that the teams don't really use as much as they should. So I've been kind of big lately at like finding spots in our code that we can just use our core components to replace. So like it's not going to be really doing much, but it is like the end user isn't going to be noticing a big change. But like on our end, we're using our tools better. And so like basically cleaning up code debt sort of things to fix for the future.
Hell yeah. I love that too. I've noticed that
it's a great way to learn systems too. Like
it's a great way to learn systems.
Oh my God. Yeah. Just like find the things that are, they made their custom thing here, but you can replace it with this like, very easy core thing instead of writing your own damn code.
Well, and I think a thing that I've realized in moving towards backend development, and my boss was even asking me like, hey, is there anything that since you're exploring different stuff, and our team is a quirk of our team by virtue of being sort of a random assortment of stuff. We have like 12 different services that do a bunch of different things, and we're constantly building new ones when like, here's a new use case. So like just right now, my boss is like going to get architectural approval for like both a Kafka messaging stream for like recording changes to merchant data, and then also a admin wrapper around Twilio for other apps to send SMS messages. I'm like, okay, here's two more random stuff that we do. But that has given the opportunity of like, there's different technologies that our apps have. There's different use cases that they do. There's some apps that are much more like, this is a reporting payment statistics service. And so it's all about like, here's a bunch of SQL queries that come up with efficient ways to report out sales data, versus other stuff that's like, here's go parse a bunch of merchant data to populate in a email template, versus et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What I found is that when my boss is asking like, hey, what sort of stuff are you liking? What are you gravitating towards? I find myself gravitating towards the stuff that we are building for other developers to use. So I really like working on like the API layer of things, or some stuff that we own that's like developer tools or developer productivity stuff. And I think what I've realized is like, that's still my product brain happening, where I'm like, oh, these are things that don't have product managers or don't have like focused design, but there's a very clear, like, I know who our customer is and it's the person I can go talk to and I can bug them and I can build a thing for them that fits what they want. Also, weirdly, maybe not weirdly, I really like writing tests. Like I've been finding that very fun, which surprised me. I didn't expect that would be the case.
Yeah, it's enjoyable. Once you learn how to do it, it gets good.
And I think that is actually one thing I like about back-end stuff is I'm noticing that like a lot of it is, all right, here's a ticket that has like these 17 different branching paths of logic. Go figure out how to efficiently build, like how I know that my API ticket is done is pass in this input and you'll get out this output in a way that's very like, as opposed to doing sort of front-end stuff where it's like, well, this is going to be wrong if it's off by a pixel or if it's the button is not showing up correctly or things like that. I kind of like at least the stuff they're doing currently, relatively straightforward input-output mapping that, works well with the way that I like to deal with the puzzles of building a thing.
It's got very deep tech talk on our formerly solely one software engineer podcast.
Exactly. What if we pivot and become just a full-on crypto bro?
Let's do it.
Deep into the weeds podcast. What else happened in the last 6 months? Yeah, also had a very busy summer. So switched jobs partway through, but we went to Italy on a family vacation with my side of the family, which was very fun for a couple weeks, which I'd never been. My girlfriend and I went to Berlin later in the summer for a week, which I had also never been, but she had lived there for a couple of years, which is very fun. We went to New York, upstate New York for a little bit. We moved apartments. Oh yeah, we moved apartments. We're in a much nicer apartment now, which is great in comparison to where the last couple ones were recorded. I have an office. We have multiple floors. It's a townhome with a little backyard, and we share one wall with our neighbors and the other one with a parking lot that we are not allowed to park in, sadly.
That's cool.
Miserable apartment hunting process, though. It was like 2 months of, I think we toured like 15 places all told, but finally found a place that is big. I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say it's nice, but it's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. That's good.
Oh, but yeah, we're still in Philadelphia. I don't remember whether or not that was up in the air at the point of the last. I mean, This is the problem, is that you know this because we've discussed this because we talk from months to months. But for the listener, I think it might have been up in the air as of the last episode. But nope, we stuck around.
Yeah. That I saw. What did I see? I saw Death Cab for Cutie.
Ooh, how was that?
A couple weeks
and
ago.
Did Charlie Bliss? Did a band called Charlie Bliss open for them?
I don't know who the opener was.
Did they have a female singer whose voice was very high and squeaky?
No, they had a male singer who sounded almost exactly like Ben Gibbard.
Ah, okay, never mind. Oh, no, you know why? Because I'm getting confused. They opened for Death Cab on a previous tour, and they're opening for Jimmy Eat World right now. Okay, gotcha. Ignore that. Anyway, Charlie Bliss, they're great. I love them.
They just came out with a new album and then had this concert. And then also I went with Nat, our Seattle friend, and then we saw the Mariners game afterwards. As it was the first time the Mariners went to the playoffs.
Exciting.
Which they lost Game 3 last night. To go 0-3 after the first round, which is, we still made it. So that's great. But it went to 18 innings.
I heard. I wish that I cared at all about baseball, because right now the Phillies just made it to whatever the semifinals. And then it was the Mariners versus the Astros, and my girlfriend's from Houston. And neither of us actually care at all about football, but have had like family members both texting us being like, hey, Houston versus Seattle, rivalry. And we're like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever.
Sure.
But it will be fun if it does end up being now Houston versus Philly for the World Series. I think that will actually be one where we'll have to at least watch a game or two.
Yeah.
Or have it on the background.
Yeah.
Or go to the brewery that is right next door to our apartment that we still haven't gone to. That looks fun.
Ooh. Yeah, it was a tense game. I had a party last night that Nat was at, and we eventually put on the game on the big screen. And eventually we all went out we kind of split up to go to different bars and clubs. And I was like, Nat, you can stay here and finish watching the game in my apartment alone. It's fine.
Good. Excellent. Shout out, Nat.
That was at like the 14th or 15th inning. But
damn, that's wild. No, we watched a little bit of the Phillies game by virtue of we went to a great OPSEC, great restaurant in our neighborhood that is a Irish pub. The Irish pub then had a kitchen that they weren't using for years. And then one of their regulars is an immigrant from Italy who was like, hey, what if I like started cooking some food back in there? And then I'll take the food money, you'll take the drinks money. And they're like, yeah, sure. And so now it's one of the best Italian restaurants in the city, and truly was phenomenal and very cheap, is in this Irish pub in our neighborhood. Anyway, the Phillies game was on.
Yeah.
We went. But yeah, it's fun getting to know Philadelphia a little bit more. And especially now that we're not running around like all summer I think it was Italy, then Seattle, then New York, which was also when my girlfriend was taking the bar. And then apartment hunting during that whole previous time, moving, Berlin, LA for a wedding, Seattle for another wedding, and then now finally nothing until the holidays. Yeah. Well, there's nothing planned until the holidays. Maybe it would be fun to do some day trip, like weekend trips or stuff like that. But
yeah, that was something that I did. I did a stand-up routine.
Hey, how'd that go? Yeah, I saw on Instagram.
Really well.
How? Yeah.
Yeah. And I need to get back to it, but I really enjoyed it. And I would love to, keep pursuing that. See how that goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me know when you're at the point where you do want to actually invite friends.
Yes.
And I will gladly
at first was 10. And then since I haven't gone to one since that, which was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I have since lowered it down to 5. So,
okay.
Yeah. Well, on the 5th one, I'll invite some people. But
there you go. And hey, maybe now our podcast will be funny.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a possibility. What else has gone on in the last 6 months? Travel, moving, jobs, elections, politics, not pandemic for the most part.
Yeah.
Our cat, my girlfriend and mine's cats are still not really getting along.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. The extra space has been helpful, but I think they fight less, but when they do fight, it's a little bit more for real than it was before.
Oh.
Where it was more just like them being constantly on edge the entire time. Now it's like, okay, they can actually relax and like chill out separate from each other. But when they do get antsy.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm building a TV stand because we need a TV stand and we have a basement now. So I can get back into woodworking stuff.
Okay. That's nice. I got to pick up more hobbies. That's not true. I have 2 careers. I can't afford hobbies.
Yeah. How are you feeling on the creative fulfillment level? I say because I am not at all. Which is a continuing theme of this whole last 2.5 years of discussion.
It's a mix. The stand-up was really fulfilling. The short play I'm in right now, I'm enjoying a little bit, but it's also like I don't believe in over-rehearsing things, but I do think there's a certain point of, I don't know, of just it's either diminishing returns or like if you're not doing anything with it, like if we're just rehearsing and the director isn't telling us to do anything different, then like what's the point?
Okay, sure.
And then also my co-actor is just overacting the fucking hell out of his scene and is trying a Jersey accent, and I'm like, okay,
cool.
Sure, whatever. The director didn't say anything about having an accent, and I'm not going to try an accent. So, also, you're not from Jersey. You're from Inwood. That's Manhattan, sir. But yeah, it's definitely got to the point of like, it's something that I'm doing, not for creative fulfillment. Like this short play, like it's fun. I enjoy it, but it's interesting trying to find those other things. That's actually, interesting you asked that specific question of creative fulfillment. I took this class about a year ago called the Path Course that I may have mentioned on here before.
I think so.
Yeah, it's basically like an actor-based or actor-geared, like self-help, self-planning, career goal-oriented class sort of thing. That's like, here are the tools and steps you need to take to like start actualizing your own, whatever it is you want to do, right? Here's the resources that I have of like the people who I know, the different feelings and stuff like that. Like, okay, translate those resources into specific actions of like, oh, I should call up my friend to grab drinks so that I can ask them to give me an agent or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. I've started to get back into doing that. And one of my paths, because you have 3 or 4 different tracks you want to go down, is specifically of like acting, creativity, or what do I have? I have it written down in here. It's like acting, creativity, and like talent to be more, acting, talent / art is what I call it. Versus I have another track that is still acting based of acting, career / community, to like try to distinguish between like what I'm trying to do professionally to push myself forward versus like what I'm trying to do for my soul and for myself to feel, you know.
I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. And it's trying to figure out what you like versus trying to figure out what you're good at, I think is a basic way to say it.
Ooh. Okay, sure.
A bit of, I don't know. But yeah, I need more creative fulfillment in my life. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then it's also trying to figure out what you want to put in as like, oh, staying in on a night to work on creative fulfillment versus like going out with your friends to grab drinks and getting socially fulfilled, and or going to a staged reading to try and build social fulfillment, but also community to join, but also creative fulfillment. Or maybe it's more career oriented, and like, should you be trying to put these in a bin? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but also if you're not enjoying it, well, what are the other things that are good about it? And it's just a lot of that for me right now of like, am I enjoying this, or am I doing this because I don't know, want to further my career specifically? And like, is this helpful for my career then, you know? But,
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of chaotic thoughts going on up here.
Yeah, that does sound like a good framing for it, though, or at least that's a framing that fits well with my own way that I think about over-categorizing everything, which maybe the fact that I'm vibing with that framing so much is not necessarily a good sign on the universal applicability of that framing.
Yeah.
But continue to not feel creatively fulfilled and not do the kinds of creative stuff that I have a lot of ego tied into, music, writing, etc., which I think we've talked about in previous ones of these, but definitely like am enjoying doing a lot more cooking. I'm enjoying getting back into woodworking and some of those other creative hobbies, but creative ones that don't have ego tied into them, which maybe that's the better thing to do. But I don't know. I miss the ego ones because it was fun to be able to be like, I write plays.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What predictions do you have for the next 6 months, either pandemic-wise, predictions, goals, or anything in thinking through the next 6 months before we discuss again in a presumably non-pandemic related check-in context? I guess I'll have to change the tag from pandemic check-in to check-in or something like that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. How you doing?
How you doing?
I'd say goals and expectations. Goals, probably 2 Oscars, 3 Emmys. Expectations, 1 Oscar, 2 Emmys.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I gotta, you gotta reach high, but
exactly.
expect less. But otherwise, I don't know. 6 months.
Yeah.
Pandemic-wise, probably resurgence over the winter, but nothing's going to happen. Nothing that's going to shut anything down anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be like the flu now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that fact?
I mean, depends on how bad it is, Mm-hmm. But I mean, I haven't done any research in the past several months at all of like Googling like, oh, what are the rates of, people dying of COVID and or being affected by it. And like, I have no specific number in my head of like how low does it have to be in order for me to feel like, oh, society isn't being lazy? But I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't know. Mixed. I think on the one hand, the notion of like, all right, just a couple of years in, it's just that like it's endemic, but it's not necessarily better. Like the fact that it is this endemic seems bad, but at the same time, like, I don't know. What would be different?
Yeah, I do say that. And then I literally clicked, as my scatterbrain does, to a random Reddit tab that I had open that says, worked half a shift. We had 10 patients in overflow. COVID unit died, or COVID unit 5 died. Tell me again how this is not a problem. So, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Damn, imagine if there hadn't been the vaccines, though.
Yeah. Be pretty bad.
They're pretty bad. I guess it is pretty bad, but...
It is already pretty bad, yeah. There's just no more field hospitals on Grand Central, on Central Park.
Yeah. What do I think will happen in the next 6 months? Pandemic-wise, I think I agree, and all the angst that goes along with that. I will probably continue to also not look at pandemic numbers, and so it'll be sort of a generalized angst that doesn't turn into any specific behavior changes, which, feel about that how you want to feel. Yeah. It was one thing that I was talking with someone about recently, that this is an interesting 6-month period, maybe a little bit more a la the 6 months, a 6-month period early in the pandemic, where I think that there isn't anything clear on the horizon of like, this is a thing that is going to change the way that I think 6 months ago. Cut it out of the episode, I'm pretty sure, but like I was talking about like, well, I know we're going to move, and I know that we're going to travel, and I know that I'm going to try to change my job, or at least make moves towards that, whether or not the change actually happens. And now at a point where it's like, on the professional level, okay, I switched into my new job and I like it, and I definitely want to do it for at least a year, which means definitely, at least by the next 6 months check-in, theoretically everything should be the same. And then, personal life wise, we already moved, we don't want to move again. And since hobby-wise, there's not anything concrete that has any time built to it. It's like, okay, the only real change I can anticipate happening is like, all right, instead of going home to my parents for the holidays for the first time, I'm going to go visit hers, which it's something, but it's also like, So I don't have any good prediction about what, if anything, will change in the next 6 months, which probably means if previous episodes suggest anything, okay, then it means something that you don't expect will happen. But it's a weird vibe. It's a good vibe to be in the like, great, after a very, very go summer, to have the ability to chill out. But at the same time, there is a little bit of like, okay, well, what does that mean for the next 6 months? And the last time that I was feeling that was, I think, earlier in the pandemic, maybe like the first or the second 6-month check-in, where it was like, well, nothing's really changing. It's very static, but it's static in a like high tension scenario. Whereas now it's like static, but in a low tension scenario. And I don't know how to feel about that. Yeah. Or I know how I should feel about that, which is good. I don't know how I do feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's the general, apathy burnout of 24-hour news cycle and everything getting worse and worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I haven't watched any more Avatar.
Yeah, that's not okay, but whatever.
Yeah. We'll make it through. Anything else for this, the potential last pandemic check-in prior to the first not pandemic check-in?
We did it. Good job, A-Dub Clubbers, which is the official title of our fan groups.
I guess, that's true.
Which I'm surprised we haven't come up with that till right now. I mean, no, that's been a thing we've had for years, obviously.
Yeah. Here's the thing. You need fans to have a fan club.
That's it.
Okay. Well, if you want to tell us how your last 6 months have gone, or want to in 6 months tell us how your next 6 months will have been, that was a very confounding prepositional stew right there. You can get in touch with us at theawclub@gmail.com. That's theawclub@gmail.com. You can also talk to us on Twitter, assuming Elon Musk does not ban us, at the AW Club. That's at THEAWCLUB. You can find our podcast at the ADUB.club. That's THEADUB.CLUB, where you can find things like our topics guide, where all of our various episodes are organized according to what sort of stuff we talk about, including where you can find the aforementioned link to what today says pandemic check-in. Maybe in the future it will say something else, where you can find this and all previous and future instances of these 6-month personal life check-ins that have nothing to do with internet nerdy pop culture. You can also, of course, find the podcast wherever podcasts are found, whether that's Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. And I believe that is everything.
AW Club out.
AW Club out. Continuing trends from prior episodes. We've now been doing this check-in long enough that we've gone through. This is the third Taylor Swift album that will be coming out over the course of our pandemic check-ins, and the second Blackpink album. I think it is Born Pink as opposed to 2020's The Album. Born Pink is better overall than the album. However, there are no songs on Born Pink that are as good as the best songs on the album. But there's just like more, it's more an overall cohesive, like solid 7 out of 10 album in comparison to the first album was more like 2 or 3 really great songs and then a lot of like, filler.
Yeah.
But, my girlfriend and I are actually going to go up to Newark to see Blackpink in, I guess, a month, which is going to be very fun. That cost so much money, but it'll be worth it.
Oh, yeah.